The sun had barely risen over the bustling streets of Accra when the laughter began. A crowd had gathered, pointing fingers and jeering at a man sleeping beneath the shade of an old baobab tree. "Look at him," one woman shouted. A grown man, lying in the dirt like a child. Children giggled, mimicking him, and even the street vendors paused, their eyes filled with scorn. The man stirred but did not wake. His name was Abiola, and he was used to the world's cruelty, but that morning, the laughter cut deeper than the hungry winds that swept the streets. Abiola had once known warmth and comfort. He remembered the smell of his mother's cooking, the laughter of his siblings, the safety of a small home near the river. But life had been cruel. The famine had taken his parents, and a dishonest uncle had stolen what little remained of his family's wealth. Now, he roamed the streets, his clothes tattered, his stomach empty, yet his heart stubbornly alive with hope that no one could see. Even in this state, Abiola carried himself with dignity. When a stray dog barked or a merchant kicked at a barrel, he would gently step aside, whispering to the animal or nodding politely to the irritated vendor. Some called him foolish. A man with no pride, they said. But Abiola knew something they did not. True strength was not measured by the riches you hold but by the heart you keep, even when the world mocks you. That morning, as stones and words flew like the angry monsoon rains, a small voice whispered from the crowd. A little girl, perhaps 7 years old, tugged at her mother's dress. "Mama, why are they laughing?" she asked. Her mother scowled, embarrassed. "Mind your tongue, child. That man is nothing to us." But the girl would not let it go. She dropped a small piece of bread from her hand and placed it near Abiola's shoulder. Quietly, he opened one eye and saw her, a smile crossing his dusty face. In that moment, the laughter around him seemed distant, almost irrelevant. Abiola opened his eyes fully and sat up. He brushed the dirt from his worn-out shirt and looked at the streets that had become both his home and his prison. The vendors were already calling, the children already laughing, the passers-by already whispering about the beggar under the tree. Yet he did not feel defeated. Somewhere deep within, a spark of stubborn hope flickered. He remembered the stories his grandmother had told him, sitting by the fire under the moonlit sky in their village long ago. "Abiola," she had said, her eyes wise and bright, "the world will mock the poor, the weak, and the unseen. But remember this, even the river starts as a humble stream, and even the tiniest seed can grow into a mighty tree. Never forget your value, my son." Those words had stayed with him, even now, as laughter and scorn rained down like bitter rain. As he slowly rose to his feet, he noticed a figure in the crowd that others did not, a wealthy trader named Kofi, draped in fine silks, observing Abiola with a look of curiosity rather than mockery. While everyone else laughed and threw insults, Kofi's eyes were sharp and discerning, noticing how Abiola helped a stray goat trapped in a fence, carefully freeing it despite the jeers of the crowd. "Interesting," Kofi muttered to himself. "A man who is poor in riches but rich in wisdom." Abiola, unaware of the attention, began his daily walk through the streets, carrying a small cloth bag of salvaged food. Each step was careful, calculated, yet determined. Every corner, every alley, every dusty path was familiar to him, yet every day brought new challenges, the cold mornings, the hunger that clawed at his stomach, the disdain of those who could not see his worth. Yet, despite the hardship, Abiola had moments of unexpected beauty. He would stop to admire the sun rising over the city, painting the red-tiled roofs golden. He would watch children play football with makeshift balls, their laughter reminding him of his own lost childhood. He would sit quietly by the riverbank, listening to the gentle rush of water, feeling the world whisper that there was more to life than pain. That morning, as he passed the market square, a man called out, mocking his tattered appearance. "Hey, Abiola. You'll never eat a proper meal again." Another voice shouted, "Who knows, maybe tomorrow you'll sleep under a tree with a crown of leaves." The crowd erupted in laughter, but Abiola merely smiled faintly. Inside him, something was stirring, a silent promise that one day, the laughter would stop, and the world would remember his name, not with ridicule, but with awe. As the sun climbed higher, Kofi approached him quietly. "Young man," he said, his voice calm yet commanding, "you have a fire in you that most men lack. Meet me at my house tomorrow. I may have work for you." Abiola blinked, unsure if the offer was real or another cruel trick. But something in Kofi's eyes told him this was different. For the first time in years, he felt a rush of hope, a whisper from destiny itself. And so, the man who had been laughed at, the man who had slept under the streets and carried nothing but his dreams, walked away from the market that day with a heart that dared to believe. Little did he know that this small encounter would mark the beginning of a journey that would change his life forever, turning the laughter of the streets into the awe of the world. The sun had barely touched the horizon the next morning when Abiola found himself standing before Kofi's grand house. Its walls gleamed white in the early light, and the carved wooden doors seemed to tell stories of wealth and power that Abiola had only imagined in his dreams. The laughter of the streets felt like a distant memory, replaced by a nervous excitement that danced in his chest. Could this be real? Could a man like him, once mocked, once ignored, truly step into a world of opportunity? Kofi welcomed him with a nod, not a word of mockery. "You come highly recommended by your actions, not your wealth," he said, gesturing for Abiola to follow. Inside, the house smelled of spices, polished wood, and faint traces of expensive perfume. Servants moved silently, carrying baskets of fruit and trays of food. Abiola's stomach rumbled, but he kept his composure, knowing that manners were as valuable as courage. "You will start small," Kofi explained. "Wealth is not given, it is earned. Observe, learn, and act wisely. Do not let pride or fear guide your steps. Patience and wisdom will serve you better than haste or anger." Abiola nodded, understanding that these words were more than instructions, they were a lesson, whispered like the proverbs of his grandmother, carrying wisdom far beyond their surface meaning. The first days were not easy. Kofi set Abiola to tasks that seemed menial, organizing supplies, observing market trends, taking notes, and learning the rhythm of trade. But Abiola approached each task with a quiet determination. When a tray of goods fell and shattered on the ground, he did not panic. He cleaned the mess carefully and rearranged the remaining items, all while calculating how to prevent such accidents in the future. Slowly, his intelligence and diligence began to shine, unnoticed by many but keenly observed by Kofi. One afternoon, while fetching water for the workers, Abiola met Oma, an elderly woman who lived nearby. She watched him silently, her eyes sharp yet kind. "Young man," she said, "you carry yourself as one who knows more than he shows. The streets have hardened you, but your heart is untouched by bitterness. Remember this, even the smallest spark can light the darkest night. And sometimes, the world will test you not to break you, but to discover the fire within." Her words stayed with him like a gentle drumbeat, echoing the old proverbs of his village. That night, under the stars, Abiola thought of his past, the streets, the laughter, and the hunger. He felt a mix of fear and hope, fear that this chance might be taken from him, and hope that perhaps destiny had finally smiled upon him. But life, as it often does, did not allow hope to grow without challenge. Among Kofi's workers was Tay, a young man who had grown up in wealth and privilege, looking down on those who came from the streets. He sneered at Abiola, whispering to others that he would never last. "Why waste time on a beggar?" Tay mocked. "He'll soil the company with his ignorance." Abiola ignored him, but each whispered insult was like a stone in his heart, heavy and sharp. One day, Kofi took Abiola to the city's bustling market, a vibrant labyrinth of smells, colors, and voices. Merchants shouted their wares, children ran barefoot, and the rhythm of the city pulsed like a drum in Abiola's chest. Kofi tested him, asking questions about prices, trade patterns, and potential buyers. Abiola listened carefully, recalling lessons from his grandmother about observation, patience, and understanding the ways of people. Slowly, he began to answer, impressing Kofi with insights that no ordinary street boy could have known. But Tay was ready to sabotage him. While Abiola stepped away to help a struggling merchant carry a heavy basket, Tay tried to convince Kofi that Abiola had mishandled money. Kofi, wise and experienced, watched quietly, noting every gesture, every expression. When Abiola returned, he calmly explained what had happened, showing his careful calculations. Kofi nodded, smiling slightly. Honesty, wisdom, and courage, qualities of a rare man. Learn, Tay, that wealth is not only in your purse but in your character. Even as Abiola earned Kofi's trust, he felt a twinge of doubt. Could he truly rise above the streets? Could he face the ridicule of society if he failed? That evening, he walked alone to the river, the water reflecting the fiery colors of sunset. He closed his eyes, whispering a prayer to the ancestors, asking for guidance. The water rippled as if answering, and he felt a deep calm settle in his soul. The next morning, Kofi presented a new opportunity, a chance to manage a small trade deal, one that could grow into something significant if handled correctly. "This is your test," Kofi said. "Succeed, and doors will open. Fail, and you must learn from it. But remember, the journey is never straight, and the path is never easy. Those who are patient and wise will always find their way." Abiola accepted the task, his heart pounding with a mixture of excitement and fear. He knew the eyes of the world would soon watch him closely. The whispers of his past, the laughter of the streets, and the skepticism of others were heavy burdens, but he carried them with a quiet strength. Each step forward was a rebellion against the life that had mocked him, a declaration that his time was coming. And somewhere, in the shadows of the market and the echoes of the streets, destiny whispered again. It promised that the boy who once slept under the baobab tree, laughed at and scorned, was about to embark on a journey that would change not only his life but the lives of everyone who had dared to doubt him. The morning sun spilled over the rooftops of Accra, painting the streets with golden light, as Abiola prepared for his first real challenge. Today, he would manage a small trade deal on behalf of Kofi, a test that could mark the start of his journey from the streets to a life of respect and possibility. His heart raced, not from fear, but from a quiet, determined excitement. Every step he took felt heavier with responsibility, yet lighter with hope. Abiola entered the bustling warehouse, where merchants shouted over the clatter of goods and the sharp smell of spices filled the air. Tay, his jealous rival, stood nearby, smirking, whispering to his peers, "Watch carefully, children. He will fail. He is nothing more than a street boy playing at a man's work." Abiola ignored him, remembering his grandmother's words, "The mouth that speaks in scorn will fall silent when the heart of the humble rises." Kofi approached, nodding. "Abiola, this trade involves the shipment of cocoa and cloth to the northern villages. You will negotiate, manage, and report directly to me. Mistakes are lessons, but dishonesty is a path to ruin." Abiola bowed respectfully and set to work, observing the merchants and studying the market prices he had memorized during his days in the streets. At first, the task seemed overwhelming. Merchants argued loudly, numbers clashed, and Tay whispered sly instructions to confuse him. But Abiola had something that money could not buy, intuition sharpened by hardship. He listened carefully, observed gestures, noted patterns, and gently mediated disputes. Slowly, the chaos transformed into a manageable flow. Midway through the day, disaster struck. One merchant accused Abiola of miscounting the cloth bundles, a claim that Tay had subtly orchestrated. The crowd grew tense, murmurs rising like a storm. Abiola felt the eyes of everyone on him, some doubting, some curious. He took a deep breath, recalling the lessons from the streets: patience, calm, and clarity. Instead of reacting with anger, he calmly recounted each bundle, demonstrating his accuracy. Then he addressed the crowd with a quiet authority, explaining the process clearly and fairly. The merchants, impressed by his honesty and intelligence, nodded in agreement. Tay's smirk faltered, replaced by a flicker of fear. For the first time, he saw that Abiola was no ordinary man. As the day wore on, Abiola's skill and calm demeanor won over many merchants. Kofi watched from a distance, a subtle smile on his face, knowing that Abiola's rise had begun not through force or wealth, but through wisdom, patience, and integrity. Later, as Abiola stepped outside for a brief moment of rest, he encountered a young street boy named Kwame, who had been observing him all morning. The boy's eyes were wide with admiration. "Sir," he whispered, "I saw how you handled everything, even when they tried to trick you. I want to learn like you." Abiola knelt, placing a gentle hand on Kwame's shoulder. "Courage and patience, my child. Observe, learn, and never let anyone tell you that you are less than you are." But the day was far from over. That evening, Tay devised a more devious plan. He secretly altered some documents related to the shipment, hoping to frame Abiola for a financial loss that could ruin him. When the discrepancies came to light, Kofi's sharp eyes immediately noted inconsistencies. He called Abiola to review the situation. Abiola studied the records carefully, his mind working quickly. He traced each transaction, cross-referenced the numbers, and noticed subtle signs of tampering, something only a man who had survived the streets could detect. With calm precision, he exposed Tay's deceit, presenting evidence to Kofi. The rival's face turned pale as the truth unfolded. Kofi's approval was quiet but profound. "You see, Abiola," he said, "character and wisdom cannot be bought. They are forged through struggle, patience, and observation. Today, you have proven that you are capable of more than mere survival, you are capable of greatness." The victory was sweet, yet Abiola remained humble. He remembered the children who had mocked him, the laughter that had once pierced his heart, and the streets that had shaped his mind. His rise was not just for himself, it was for the boy who had slept under the baobab tree, the children who watched from afar, and the ancestors whose wisdom guided him. That night, he returned to his small quarters, feeling a sense of pride that did not boast, a joy that did not demand recognition. The path ahead was still uncertain, filled with challenges, betrayals, and choices that could either elevate or destroy him. But for the first time in years, he felt the thrill of destiny calling, whispering that the streets were behind him and the world was waiting. Even as Abiola slept, the city whispered around him. The markets would continue their chaos, the merchants their arguments, and the streets their laughter, but something had changed. The boy who had been mocked, laughed at, and ignored had proven his worth. A seed of respect had been planted, and the roots of his journey had begun to grow deep. And somewhere, hidden in the shadows of the city, Tay plotted again, unaware that every attempt to sabotage Abiola only strengthened him. The rivalry was far from over, but Abiola now knew this truth: the world fears those who rise from nothing with patience, wisdom, and courage. The streets had laughed at him once. But now, Abiola was rising, step by careful step, ready to turn mockery into awe, and survival into power. The journey had truly begun. Months had passed since Abiola had first stepped into Kofi's grand house, and his reputation had begun to grow. Word of the young man who had risen from the streets with nothing but wisdom and integrity spread quietly among merchants and traders. His calm intelligence, humility, and ability to resolve disputes earned him trust, respect, and even envy. Yet, every rise comes with shadows, and Abiola was about to face one of his greatest tests. Tay, still burning with jealousy, had grown more cunning. He watched Abiola closely, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. "He may have cleverness," Tay whispered to another worker, "but every man has a weakness. I will find his." Tay's plan was not simple sabotage this time. It was a betrayal designed to destroy Abiola's hard-earned trust with Kofi and ruin his reputation entirely. One afternoon, Kofi entrusted Abiola with a major business proposal, an opportunity to expand their trade into neighboring villages. Abiola pored over the details carefully, crafting strategies that respected local customs, pricing fairness, and ethical trade. Yet, as he presented the plan to Kofi, whispers began to circulate. Someone had leaked false information to a key investor, suggesting Abiola was untrustworthy and had mishandled funds. The room fell silent. All eyes turned to Abiola. Even Kofi's expression betrayed a flicker of doubt. Abiola's heart sank for only a moment. He remembered the streets, the laughter, the hardships, and the wisdom passed down by his grandmother. "A strong tree bends in the wind but does not break," he whispered to himself. Drawing on his patience and careful observation, he calmly explained every step he had taken, presenting evidence and recounting each transaction in detail. The lies unraveled under the weight of truth. Tay's face turned pale, realizing his betrayal had been exposed. But the danger was not over. The incident revealed to Abiola that not all enemies were obvious. Some wore the mask of friendship, waiting for the right moment to strike. He realized that in the world of trade and ambition, intelligence alone was not enough. He needed vigilance, wisdom, and the ability to read people's hearts. Amid this turmoil, Abiola encountered Edena, a woman of grace and strength, who had recently joined Kofi's team. She had heard of Abiola's journey and was curious to meet the man who had risen from the streets. When they spoke, Abiola was struck by her sharp mind and gentle heart. She, too, had known hardship and loss, and there was an unspoken understanding between them, a bond born of resilience and shared experience. Edena's presence brought new warmth to Abiola's days, and together they began to navigate the complexities of trade and strategy. She admired his humility and clarity of thought, while he was inspired by her courage and insight. Yet, even in this budding connection, shadows loomed. Tay, furious that his schemes had failed, grew more desperate and began plotting further deceit. One evening, as Abiola returned from the market, he discovered a note slipped under the door of his quarters. The message was simple yet chilling: "Not everyone who smiles at you is a friend. Beware the eyes that shine too brightly, they may hide a knife." Abiola's stomach tightened. He recognized the warning, not as a threat from a stranger, but as a hint of the betrayal brewing close to him. He confided in Edena, who listened intently, her eyes reflecting both concern and determination. "The world tests those who are meant to rise," she said softly. "Your strength lies not only in your skill but in your wisdom to see the truth and act with courage." Together, they devised careful strategies to protect their work, secure their trade, and expose deceit before it could harm them. Days later, Kofi assigned Abiola to oversee a delicate negotiation with a prominent trader in a distant village. This deal could elevate Abiola's reputation or ruin him completely. As he traveled, he felt the weight of expectation, the whispers of the streets behind him, and the silent judgment of those who once laughed. Yet, he also felt a quiet resolve, the fire of destiny that had never dimmed, even in the darkest nights of hunger and mockery. Upon reaching the village, Abiola encountered unexpected challenges. Some traders were skeptical of a young man, formerly homeless, stepping into negotiations. Others attempted to deceive him with false information. But Abiola's patience, knowledge, and keen observation allowed him to navigate the intricate dance of commerce and culture. He respected the local traditions, listened to the elders, and honored their wisdom, earning their trust and admiration. Meanwhile, Tay's final betrayal came to light. He had tried to manipulate the shipment documents to divert goods for personal profit, hoping to implicate Abiola. But Edena's sharp eyes and Abiola's vigilance uncovered the plot before it could succeed. Confronted with the evidence, Tay had no choice but to confess. Kofi, while disappointed in Tay, praised Abiola for his courage, wisdom, and unwavering integrity. By the time Abiola returned to the city, he had grown not only in skill and reputation but in understanding of the world's complexity. He realized that wealth was not merely about money, it was about wisdom, relationships, and the ability to navigate both loyalty and deceit. That night, sitting under the stars, Abiola reflected on the journey so far. The streets had taught him resilience, the laughter had taught him humility, and the betrayals had taught him vigilance. And somewhere deep within, he felt a spark of destiny burning brighter than ever. One day, he knew, the man who had been mocked, laughed at, and underestimated would rise, not just as a trader, but as a force the world could not ignore. As he closed his eyes, Edena by his side, he whispered a silent vow, "I will not only survive. I will rise. And when I do, the world will see the truth of my heart." The city of Accra sparkled like a jewel under the rising sun, but Abiola's mind was far from its beauty. His journey from the streets to trusted trader in Kofi's enterprise had been remarkable, yet the path ahead was far more treacherous. Today marked the beginning of his boldest venture, launching his own trading business, using the knowledge, wisdom, and connections he had gained. He stood at the edge of the bustling market, watching the vendors and merchants who had once scorned him. Memories of stones thrown and laughter echoed faintly in his mind, but they were now fuel, not chains. He whispered to himself, "I will not forget the streets that raised me, but I will rise above them." With a determined heart, Abiola began his first shipment, a careful balance of cocoa, cloth, and spices, prepared with meticulous attention to every detail he had learned from Kofi. Yet, the world had its trials. Within weeks, a sudden market downturn threatened his fledgling business. Prices of cocoa plummeted, merchants began to doubt the reliability of new traders, and rumors spread that Abiola was inexperienced and unprepared. For the first time in his new life, he faced fear, not of hunger, but of failure. Every coin, every shipment, every decision teetered on the edge of disaster. Edena, ever his confidant, stood by him, her voice calm yet firm. "Abiola, every storm tests the roots of the tree. You have grown strong, but even the strongest need wisdom and courage to survive the wind." Her words reminded him of the proverbs his grandmother had whispered long ago. The river carves the rock not through strength, but through persistence and patience. Abiola gathered his small team, including some of the street children he had once helped. "We must act carefully," he said, "but we must also act boldly. There is risk in hesitation, but greater risk in fear." They worked day and night, reorganizing shipments, negotiating directly with trusted merchants, and seeking alliances with influential traders who valued honesty and integrity. The turning point came when a rival trader attempted to corner the cocoa market, planning to force Abiola out by hoarding supplies and spreading false rumors. The stakes were higher than ever. If Abiola failed, he would lose everything he had built. But he had something his rival lacked: knowledge, ingenuity, and the respect of the people. Drawing on traditional wisdom, Abiola used clever negotiation, offering fair trade agreements that benefited both suppliers and buyers. He respected local customs and involved village elders in discussions, ensuring trust at every level. Slowly, merchants began to favor him, drawn by his fairness and reliability. The rival traders' schemes began to unravel. Yet, just as hope surged, disaster struck. A shipment of cocoa destined for the northern villages was delayed due to a storm, threatening to undo weeks of careful planning. Abiola's heart pounded, but he refused to panic. He quickly rerouted part of the shipment through a safer, though longer, route and sent trusted messengers to manage the logistics. The storm passed, and the goods reached their destination, securing both profit and trust. The victory was celebrated quietly among his team, but Abiola's mind remained focused on the future. He knew this was only the beginning. The road to becoming truly influential and wealthy required vision, courage, and patience. He met with Kofi, who watched him with pride. "You have learned well," Kofi said. "Not only the trade, but the spirit of leadership. Remember, wealth is not measured only in gold and goods, it is measured in trust, respect, and the ability to lift others with you." Abiola reflected on these words deeply. He remembered the children who had laughed at him, the strangers who had thrown stones, and the streets that had shaped his mind. He realized that true power lay not in crushing rivals, but in turning adversity into opportunity, mockery into motivation, and hardship into wisdom. As months passed, Abiola's business flourished. His reputation grew across villages and cities, merchants trusted him, elders respected him, and even those who had mocked him in the past began to watch in awe. He extended support to street children, giving them education, training, and hope, a reflection of the second chance he had been given. One evening, as he walked through the market, Adana took his hand. "Look around, Abiola," she said softly. "The boy who slept under the baobab tree now walks among kings and merchants. You have built more than wealth, you have built respect, trust, and a legacy." Abiola smiled, remembering the laughter, the hunger, and the cold nights. "Yes," he whispered. "But I will never forget the streets that raised me. Every coin I earn, every deal I make, will honor those who are forgotten and mocked. I will rise, not just for myself, but for them." The world that had once laughed at him now looked on with awe. But Abiola remained humble, grounded in the lessons of his past. Wealth had come, but it was his courage, integrity, and wisdom that truly made him rich. The boy who had slept in the dirt had grown into a man who could change the lives of many, and that was a wealth no one could take away. As night fell over Accra, the stars reflected in the river where Abiola once prayed. He looked up and whispered to the ancestors who had guided him, "I have risen, not for revenge, but for purpose. May my journey light the path for those who come after me." In that quiet moment, Abiola understood the truth: riches could come and go, but integrity, courage, and wisdom would remain, guiding the man who had once been laughed at toward a legacy that would never fade. The streets of Accra had changed, but so had Abiola. The boy who had once slept under a baobab tree, laughed at and ignored, now walked with quiet confidence through markets that had once mocked him. Merchants bowed slightly as he passed, villagers whispered his name with admiration, and even Tay, humbled and shamed by his own schemes, kept a careful distance. Abiola had become more than a trader, he had become a symbol of resilience, wisdom, and integrity. Yet, despite the wealth that now surrounded him, ships loaded with goods, a growing empire of trade, and riches beyond what he had ever dreamed, Abiola remained humble. He remembered the streets, the cold nights, the hunger, and the laughter that had once pierced his heart. Those memories were not regrets but lessons, carved into his spirit like the patterns on traditional African cloth, beautiful and unbroken. Kofi, proud and smiling, approached him one morning. "Abiola," he said, "you have done more than succeed. You have built a legacy. Wealth is nothing without wisdom and compassion, and you possess both in abundance." Abiola nodded, thinking of all the street children who now had food, education, and hope because of him. Among them, Kwame and several others he had once mentored now walked confidently, inspired by his journey. He had learned that true riches were not counted in coins but in lives touched and hearts uplifted. One evening, Adana, standing beside him on the balcony of his grand yet simple home, spoke softly. "Abiola, look how far you've come. From the streets to this empire. You've not only changed your life but the lives of countless others." He smiled, remembering the first day they had met, her eyes filled with quiet curiosity and understanding. "Yes," he said, "but I will never forget where I came from. The laughter, the hardship, even the betrayal, they were all steps that brought me here. Every child mocked, every stone thrown, every sleepless night, they taught me strength." The city had once mocked him, yet now it honored him. Merchants who had sneered now sought his guidance, elders invited him to counsel, and villagers welcomed him with respect. Even Tay approached cautiously, offering apologies for his envy and schemes. Abiola accepted them with quiet grace, teaching that forgiveness was a power far stronger than revenge. As his wealth and influence grew, Abiola turned his attention to the streets, the very streets that had shaped him. He built shelters, schools, and community centers, giving hope to those who had none. He trained young men and women in trade, ethics, and leadership. Children who had once laughed at him or feared poverty now learned that resilience, patience, and wisdom could change their destinies. Abiola's journey culminated in a grand celebration in the village square, where he had once begged for scraps and warmth. Villagers and traders gathered, eager to witness the man who had risen from nothing. Adana stood beside him, their hands joined, a symbol of love, partnership, and shared triumph. He addressed the crowd, his voice calm yet carrying the weight of experience. "My brothers, sisters, and friends," he began, "I once slept under the shade of a baobab tree, laughed at and scorned. The streets shaped me, hardship taught me, and betrayal strengthened me. But today, I stand not only for myself but for all who are forgotten, mocked, or underestimated. True wealth is not gold, land, or goods, it is kindness, wisdom, courage, and the power to lift others as you rise." The crowd fell silent, hanging on every word, feeling the depth of his journey, the truth in his message, and the power of his example. Even those who had once ridiculed him now bowed their heads in respect, humbled by the transformation of a man who had refused to be broken. That night, under the same stars that had witnessed his whispered prayers long ago, Abiola reflected on the path he had walked. From the laughter of the streets to the applause of the world, he had learned the most important lesson of all: destiny is not defined by where you start, but by the choices you make, the heart you keep, and the courage to rise when all others doubt you. Adana, sensing his thoughts, leaned close. "Abiola, you have become a billionaire," she whispered. "But more importantly, you've become a beacon of hope." He nodded, feeling the truth of her words. Money could build empires, but character built legacies. And Abiola, once laughed at and dismissed, had built both. From that day on, the name Abiola was remembered across towns, villages, and cities, not as a man who had slept on the streets, but as a man who rose with wisdom, courage, and compassion. The boy who had been mocked had become a leader, a teacher, a benefactor, and a billionaire. The streets' laughter had been replaced by admiration, respect, and hope. And so, the story came full circle. From the depths of poverty and scorn to the heights of wealth and influence, Abiola's journey taught a simple yet profound truth: life may laugh at you, mock you, or test you, but those who persevere with integrity, kindness, and courage will always rise, and in rising, lift others with them. As the moon rose over Accra, casting silver light on the river where he once prayed, Abiola whispered a final promise: "I will never forget the streets that made me, the laughter that strengthened me, or the heart that guided me. And I will spend every day ensuring that no child is laughed at, forgotten, or left without hope." And with that, the man who had once slept under the shade of a tree, laughed at by the world, became a billionaire, a legend, and a living testament to the power of resilience, wisdom, and kindness.